The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Excellent. So welcome everybody to this webinar, and welcome Isabelle. I think we're just heading to our time slot, so we'll just wait for a few more people to join us. But how are you this morning? It's afternoon there, huh?
Yes, it's 1 o'clock here in Brussels, Belgium. Yes. Very, very excited about this opportunity to have this dialogue with you, Elva.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us. I know you've had a busy few days running programs here, there and everywhere, I believe. So thank you so much for joining us. Really, really good to have this conversation. So the conversation is about a new take on diversity and inclusion, how you can be a change agent in today's diverse and turbulent world. We're here to talk to HR people, people in consulting or HR roles, and love to hear your perspective, Isabelle, as I know they are, in how to make a difference in terms of diversity and inclusion today from this role in HR. Any initial thoughts you want to give us just to get us going? And then I really want to hear a bit of your story, introduce each other. We're just waiting for a few more people to join us. I know there's plenty of people who signed up here, over 100 people signed up. So yeah, any initial words?
Maybe one very initial word, which is around authenticity. I think if we have this conversation in a very authentic way, and very natural way, in the sense that when we talk about diversity and inclusion, sometimes it goes too strategic. Let's talk very, naturally about
very good.
more daily work, behavior, something very authentic.
Practical and authentic. Very good. Yes, it can get very conceptual, actually, can't it? Yes, very good. Right, so quite a few more people are joining us. So before we go into it, let me just say a few things about the webinar, and how to manage ourselves. So we've got an hour for this conversation. Isabelle and I have planned this to be an informal conversation. We have some slides, but it's definitely not webinar by slides, is it, Isabelle? This is a conversation about diversity and inclusion, but there are some slides to just support what we're saying. I am recording this, so we'll be sending around a recording to those people who've registered. Do let us know if you can hear. I guess that's the first thing to say. Use the chat field. Please just let us know you can hear, say I can hear you, thank you, or yes, or anything. I have someone monitoring the chat, Freya, who manages our 360 Bureau. She's managing it. So please do bombard her with signs that you're there, and she'll let me know if there's any problems that we need to deal with technically. We are using the chat button, so if there's questions that arise through the course of the hour, please do note them there. We may not get to them in the course of the conversation, but if there's any outstanding, what we'll do is follow up with some question and answers. So every question is of interest to us. Make sure you have a glass of water, make yourself comfortable. And the other thing just to say, sorry, before we go into introductions, is thank you so much everybody for taking part in our poll. So the poll went out, we had 26 people answered, which was fantastically useful. And the headlines are, let me just give you the top line from that before we get started, is that most people were most interested in two major questions. One, what are the critical components of an effective diversity and inclusion strategy? And the second question that people were most interested in was, what does a truly inclusive leader look like? So we've definitely been thinking about that as we've been preparing our conversation today. So I am absolutely sure we will cover those points and others as well. So let's move into introducing each other, and let's just see what we're all about. Let me see if I can also drive my machine, which is always a little bit debatable. So here we are. We have a screen full of gorgeous people. Look at that. This is what we are here for, to talk about how to have work and the world work for every single person showing up on this screen. Isn't that amazing? Isabelle, before we hear, you know, about Pluribus, etc., why is this topic of interest to you at all? Where does it come from for you?
Well, I really believe it comes from my family roots. So I'm French. I was born in Paris, and yet my parents were born in Tunisia.
Right.
So they have a very, North African background, and they had to move out of Tunisia to move to France. And I think that they really early on felt the notion of exclusion, and because of that, feeling different, they were overprotective. They were afraid. I think they were really in the defensive mode. Yes. And the way that I saw them sometimes suffering gave me the sense of building inclusion, being very sensitive to how people feel in order to be happy. So that's probably the seeds from my childhood.
Very good, very good. Yeah, that's excellent.
And you maybe Elva, do you want to
for me?
A few words from your perspective?
Yeah, certainly. So for me, I was thinking about this morning, actually. Probably my interest in this topic first came up when I moved from the north of England to the south of England. Now, that may not seem like a big deal when you're talking Tunisia to France, right? It's such a small scale shift. But I, having felt totally integrated in my community at age 7, I found myself feeling alien. Not knowing how to talk to these people, everything wasn't working the way I expected it to, and I really felt alien, probably for about 5 years until I started to feel more integrated. But what's interesting was I held on to my a little bit of a northern accent, it fitted what I felt. You know, my identity was, I'm not like them, I'm something a bit different. And so that all fitted, and I kept that slight northern twang. And interestingly enough, I found myself back home in the northeast of England. And I do feel back home. So it's these identity associations are very, very important. And it just shows how easy it is for someone to feel excluded. And then, as you say, the impact on your well-being, your happiness, and, you know, how you get what you get out of an employee, you know. So yeah, very, very interesting. So thank you for asking that. Yes, it took me back to when I was 7. Let's hear more about who's who. Let's again try and work my slides. Whoops, said Daisy. So welcome everyone. Look at those lovely roots. How to have strong foundations in a diverse forest. I guess that's how can we make a forest work? That's what we're about. This is us, and this is the objectives of the webinar. First of all, we want to give you a bit of context about talent innovations and Pluribus. What's this about? We're looking at why organisations, why are we moving from diversity strategies to the focus being on creating inclusion. Why is that happening, and how is that happening? And here's specifically how we can use diversity and inclusion 360 tool to engage people, leaders, all employees, and look at the concept of being inclusive change agents. I guess that is a concept that we're really focusing on today. What does that mean? And obviously we're open to questions and answers. So that's really the framework for the hour. In terms of talent innovations, some of you know me, some of you don't. So just a few headlines there. Family business founded in 2001. We focus on 360. So we're a niche 360 player. Provide 360 tools and psychometrics and the coaching and support that goes with it globally, focused in London. What else can I say there? I think the rest sort of goes without saying. And these are the sorts of people that we work with. And we absolutely love 360 because I see the positive and transformational results that a 360 diagnostic process can achieve with reasonable ease if you get the process and the framework right. And I think focusing on inclusive leadership is one of those positively empowering frameworks. And that's why I'm here talking to you, Isabelle, because I really see that the mixture of what you're focusing on with a tool like 360 is a very, very powerful combination. And I know you're going to tell us more about your experience of that Is there anything you want to say about that straight off?
No, I think for me it's also very interesting to hear your passion when you talk about your organization. Yeah. I feel it.
Good. So I should have passion on that list. Where's passion? I can't see it. So this is what I see talent innovation standing for, is about empowering and inspiring others to grow, to move forward, challenging their preconceptions. We're adding a little bit of magic to a developmental process, actually, and we're all about really poking and provoking thought and using data to do that, data and coaching. So that's what we stand for. So definitely enough about us. How would you like to introduce Pluribus, Isabelle? Do tell us about you, your practice, and your team.
Yes, my team. And just one little note about the picture of the tree with the roots. It's just a picture I took at the Botanical Garden in Singapore a few months ago when I was doing some workshop for one of our key clients. So it's a real picture. So how can I introduce Pluribus? Well, Pluribus is a global network of amazing individuals who are experienced facilitators and who are really walking the talk on some key values around respect, around inclusion. So it's really a delight for me to work with these people all over the world. We are nearly 50 people in our network, and where we stand for is really, we believe in a world where everyone belongs. So we are passionate about the people topic. We are passionate about building bridges between women and men, between people who are different and sometimes also have commonalities. So it's really a deep passion. And the way we're working with our partners, as opposed to clients or as vendors, we are more partners. We are really keen in building partnerships to co-create, to co-design, to learn also together, because this is not a field, the field of diversity and inclusion where you have all the answers. You have frameworks, you have models, you have experiences, yes, and yet you are learning as we go, because from one situation to another, one context to another, one country, one company to another, things would be different. So I think it's more a question of a mindset. And this is how we are working with our partners. It's really having some adjustments, customization, understanding the journey, but also always trying to find the best team, the best Pluribus team for that specific environment, whether it's a country, a region, a business, a company. So that's really where we put all our energy. And as you said, Elva, I just came back from a 3-day travels where I had to facilitate a number of workshops. And I was saying, yeah, I feel tired maybe physically, but at the same time, so re-energized by the quality of the conversations that I had with all the participants from these various organizations, but also by the degree of engagement that people, individuals, wants to really show up as inclusive leaders, inclusive managers, inclusive employees. It's not a question of hierarchy.
Very good. That's really interesting you say that, because I was reflecting on this myself, that the conversations I'm having with some very senior leaders who wouldn't, maybe just a year ago, wouldn't necessarily be raising this topic with me, and they're raising it and they're saying this is top priority for me, and I'm a top businessman, and it's fantastic to hear that there is that level of interest and commitment going on. It's really great to work with. Just to follow up on something you mentioned there, Isabelle, you mentioned about customizing and adapting your approach to each country, each organization very carefully. I really, really understand what you're talking about there, because what we see is that a 360 feedback tool needs to be carefully customized in lots of subtle ways. The communications, the emails, as well as the content of the survey and the reporting, all of the pieces need to fit just right with the culture of where it's going into for it to be really effective. And I guess that's really what you're saying. There needs to be a sufficient alignment with the culture for any of the messages really to land. Does that fit your experience?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for pointing this out, because the danger, especially in that kind of field where you talk about culture change, you talk about transformation, behavioral change, you shouldn't come up with something that is off the shelf. So something like, parachuting a training, but a training in the sense that it's very rigid and very, everyone would get the same basket or the same sample. It's not possible because of the different journey. So you have some core elements, and yet you need to really understand the specific context, the journey, understand the key milestones, and also the level of readiness.
Yeah.
Because you have, it could be the exact context, the right context, but there is no readiness. And the level of readiness could be also assessed by the willingness to go with 360 feedback, for example. So it's interesting to ask very deep questions at the very beginning of any project that we would start with any organizations, to understand, to have a sort of a diagnostic, to understand where that company is. It's really something specific. So specific that at the end of the day, you realize that diversity and inclusion, it's actually part of all the different processes of any organization. It's really mainstreaming into the organization. So it's not just a project on the side. It needs to be integrated, embedded in all the process of the organization. So that's why it's important to understand where the organization is.
Yes, absolutely. And that fits with the conversation I was having with this top guy earlier in the week, who was saying diversity and inclusion is a huge, huge challenge for them. They know they have a very, very big problem, like really big problem. And they know they need to do some work in this area. But actually, he was saying he wonders whether it's actually, they need to really look at the trade unions and the union supervision as being a real block. And so, if you weren't going to include some key people in the process, then of course nothing's going to really move forward, So you need to be, as seeing it as a totally integrated across everything the organization does has got to be the only way to really make it work.
Mm-hmm. And also it's a question of perspective and how you address the agenda, because the danger sometimes, the trap, or sometimes it could be the catalyst, but the danger from my perspective is to actually start something because there is a problem, or to have the idea it's because we want to solve a problem. Sometimes it's the case, and it could be a catalyst for real intensive and appropriate relevant work. At the same time, I believe that if companies understand why it's important, then they will look at it from an opportunity. So it's not in order to avoid a risk, for example, but more to access a new opportunity.
Yeah.
Then the mindset for the whole work might be totally different.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you look at the opportunity as opposed to the problem, then you could open up a huge number of opportunities.
Yes. Yes. So if you put the whole initiative under a positive moving forward framework, then you're likely to get a better result. You'll get more traction, probably face less resistance, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. But you're right. Sometimes acknowledging there's a problem can kick it off and allow there to be budget put aside, etc. So you sort of have to work where the leaders are at, I guess. Where do you start when you're, I don't know, a client comes to you saying, please come help us work in this area? What's the initial deep questions you might ask, and how do you approach it?
Well, first of all, it's very important to have conversations, and to have conversations with a sample of people. Because usually, especially in our position, because Pluribus is really positioned as an expert in the D&I lens.
Yes.
So usually the the DNA manager or the IND manager who would contact us. And it's important to have this conversation and also hear from their perspective. And yet we need to have the opportunity to hear different voices. So we need to have a cross-section of people from different hierarchy, different businesses, different functions, different countries. So you have a sense of where, you know, the company is. And also it's not to look only at the barriers, because that's also a danger. What are the obstacles? What are the barriers? What's the blocking part? But also what are the positive factors? So what is working well? So in the question we had, in order to do this kind of diagnostic, would be a combination of questions to, first of all, understand, you know, where people are in their understanding. What diversity, what's inclusion for you? What are the initiatives? What are the actions?
Yeah.
How do you feel? Do you feel included?
Yeah.
Do you feel that your company is really promoting equal opportunities? So we are having a combination of key questions to go beyond what is visible. So we're trying to have really a sort of a systemic approach to go beyond and understand really what's going on.
And do you use, is this a consultant heavy process, or is it a survey driven process, Isabelle?
It's a combination of having some quantitative data and qualitative data.
Okay.
So we will definitely look at some demographics, some numbers to have a big snapshot. And then we will have a series of, it could be individual telephone interviews, it could be focus groups.
Okay.
You know, we are having conversations and idea suggestions from the people from the organization. But it's not, I mean, in our experience, it's not going to be something that will take few months and having a dozen of consultants. No, it's really done in a very balanced way, just to get some insights.
Do you want to talk us through what happens next in a typical consulting piece? I don't know if this slide may or may not help you, Isabelle, so let me know.
Yeah, I'm sure it can help in any case. So in any case, now that we have these slides around the 3H, which is really the cornerstone of how we do our work in any case, whether it's in the diagnostic, in the then the consolidation of all the data that we gather, that would be the next step.
Yes.
And then it would be a very deep conversation with the sponsored team, whether it's the D&I team, the HR managers, to understand, this is what we heard. This is maybe what we could do together. Yes. Always in this co-design, cooperation mindset.
Nice.
And definitely we will engage, whether it's during the design process or whether it's during any workshop or conversations, always engage the 3H. So in anything we do around inclusion and diversity, you need to understand with your head. So you need to understand why it's important, meaning the business case. And it could be totally different from one person to another, from one organization to another. And it's okay, there is no judgment. It's just why, for you, maybe, for you personally, why it's important. And some people, I met some very senior people saying, please, stop spending time about the why, because this is the right thing to do.
It's
so
just
why
morally the right thing. Yes, exactly.
This is the right thing to do. Yeah. But even that, this is the right thing. First, you need to address the head, so the understanding part.
Yeah.
And also understanding what is diversity and what is inclusion. Because at the moment, especially in the media, you hear so many things. The topic has been used in many ways. So just to clarify, and most often widen the understanding of what is diversity, visible and invisible, similarities, commonalities, widen the dimension, but also what is inclusion. And this is where the 360 inclusion assessment can help, because people are saying, what do you mean by inclusion? Well, it means you need to be inclusive. Okay, but what does it mean to be inclusive? Yeah. Well, it means you have a certain number of attitudes. So the second H is the heart. So it's the commitment with the heart, because it's also touch emotions. It's interesting that the way that the two of us introduce ourselves and referred to some of our, emotions, maybe as a child.
Yeah, and our
So the
experiences,
emotion
yes.
is critical. When you talk about inclusion, you talk about exclusion. When you feel excluded,
That's it.
It has a lot of impact on the person you are, the way you are showing up to the world, the way you are performing, etc., etc. So the commitment, but also the emotions are critical.
Yes.
And then, of course, the third H is the hands. So it's really taking action and having simple tools. So if I go back to your initial question, Elva, so first is the diagnostic, understanding what's going on.
Yep.
Then consolidate the data to see, okay, based on our experience, based on all the tools that we have, what makes sense for that organization. So we're going to build an intervention, a workshop, in order, and also using different tools, pre-work, post-work. I mean, we want, at the end of the way, we want to ensure that there is some sustainability in the learning. But we will always try to address, the head, the heart, and the hand. Okay. So as soon as we have a design, the next step is to first, of course, do a pilot program just to validate, see whether the program, the conversation, because everything is around conversation, whether that resonates for the specific company, for that specific culture. And then usually, and this is really what I would always recommend, is to engage first the top management.
Okay. It's critical,
really,
isn't it? Yes.
Ensure that there is indeed this credibility, because as soon as you are raising awareness in the organization, the first question that people ask is, what about our team, top leader?
Yeah.
What about our senior management? Are they engaged? Are they having these kind of conversations too? So it's important that there is some very strong strategic alignment among the top leadership of an organization, so that the diversity and inclusion strategy is really part of the overall business strategy. Yes. That's critical. And one way, and again, I'm making the link with the 360 feedback, one way of showing a very, very strong signal to the organization that the top leaders, the leaders are committed, is using a 360. Because by using a 360, you're asking people around you. If you're asking people around you, it means that you have the courage to also do something with the insights, with the reports. So I'm sure we'll go back later. I will probably stop.
Very good. I'm getting a flavour of it. But it's interesting you say that you absolutely start with the top management, because I was listening to some very large organisations in a conference the other day on this topic, and these organisations felt they'd really achieved quite a lot in this agenda. There was more to go, but they had achieved quite a lot. They'd been working hard for 15, 20 years, and they had been getting some results. And what they were saying was there needed to be three things for a shift to happen and these things to improve. And one of those three was significant change in plans and behaviour in the top managers. The other two things were the policies, HR policies, and the third thing was structural changes. So, i.e., things that would really make a difference, integrated and taken through the whole organisation. So fits with what you're saying there, totally.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because indeed I was mainly focusing on the co-design or the co-creation of an intervention, a learning intervention for a specific audience. And if the D&I strategy is only around education, it will fall. You
very interesting.
Need to work on reviewing your HR management processes through the diversity and inclusion lens, in order to ensure that all your processes are fair, equitable, and inclusive. Yeah. So there is a deep work that needs to happen, especially around the HR management processes, because otherwise and on one way you're trying to create some awareness, some skill buildings around inclusive behaviors, but if you don't have at the same time a balance with some structural points and some look at how you are recruiting, promoting, assessing in an inclusive and fair way, it will be unbalanced.
Exactly.
And then the last point I want to make is it's very important to have this engagement, alignment, especially at the strategic level of the top leaders, having also employees who are creating a buzz, having the willingness to make things happen. So when you have the two together, this is where
that becomes powerful. Yes, that becomes really engaging.
Exactly.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting. I was on a ski holiday 2 years ago, and I wasn't allowed to ski. I had a bad back, so I wasn't allowed to ski. So I had to swim every day, and I don't really like swimming. But there was this very nice swimming pool, and it had a sort of like a whirlpool thing, and for me, it was very, very interesting because there was a direction that the water was going around this whirlpool. And sometimes I went the one way around and went with the flow and was taken along, and the experience was amazing. I was really moving fast and I felt like there was I could really move a distance with reasonable ease, and it was easy, right? And then sometimes I go the other way and try and swim against the flow and against this wave, I guess. And it was such hard work. I was really putting heaps of energy in and not getting anywhere much at all. And it was absolutely exhausting. And I keep things I do now, I'm looking for, where's that flow again? I want that flow. I'll go that way. And I could go either way to get to the same result. So I think what you're saying is find the flow, make sure you build that in and you go with it. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm going back to this notion of authenticity and less conceptual. And at the end of the day, what do we want?
Yes.
We want to be happy at work. We want to be able to have a voice. We want to be able to perform, use our skills. We want to be seen. We want to thrive. We want to develop ourselves. We want to see that we can, have a positive change in our working environment, in our sphere of influence. And that's why I'm saying it's not about hierarchy. It's not, it's an employee, the way that person is working with his or her colleagues is as important as how a leader is also, working with his or her team. So what I'm saying is, at the end of the day, we want to be part, to belong.
We want to belong. It seems to be a basic human need, doesn't it?
Absolutely, to belong and to feel that yes, we are unique. I'm who I am.
Yeah.
I want to be able to be who I am in my work environment and in the world. And that's why sometimes, it's really about having conversations. And when you can create in the organization the space for people to have open conversation, then things are moving.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily reinventing the wheel. It's just creating the space to have authentic conversation.
Yes.
So you could work better. And of course, at the end of the day, it's about performance also. So it will improve the performance, but it's a win-win.
Yes. And actually having and actually, if you want to be a change agent in this whole process as an HR person, it's about generating those conversations, facilitating them, and generating new conversations, rather than just hearing the same old things. That's what will lead to some sort of shifts, won't it?
The HR population, and I know that we have a lot of HR people probably in that webinar. The HR population is a critical population. It's a very important population to support the change in their organization. So it's that's why we need to have them as allies.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, as an ex-HR person myself, I see that the stand that HR or OD, whatever your sort of specialism is, what the stand you can take can be uniquely strong in this area. And if you make it a positive one, like you say, that will also help, and you can create that positive flow around the circle. Do you want to say something about the sorts of people you've been working with, Isabelle?
Yeah. Yes, just go back to the HR population, because as I said, they are allies, they are really strong relay in their respective divisions, functions, etc. And at the same time, because it's heavy. I mean, the HR role, nowadays, it's a very heavy role. So I know how busy the HR population
There's
is.
lots to do.
A lot to do. They have to have so many different hats.
Yeah.
So I also want to say that the HR population, in their role in being a change agent, D&I supporter, etc., they also need to pass the baton. So
yes,
they shouldn't be the only people responsible to driving the change. So it's how do we in organization share, with leaders, managers, employees, and support the idea or encourage the fact that every individual should be a change agent.
Very good.
So I think that's for me the key. And when I look at all this, all the logos and of our key clients or partners, I'm very proud. First of all, very, very proud for the trust that all this organization, gave us throughout the last 13 years that we've been working with Pluribus. And all these organizations are committed. So the commitment is here, and the world is going fast.
Yes.
The business, the priorities, and so I know, because I have this privilege of being able to work from one organization to another, and you can see that they're very diverse in terms of the industries. We're working with various industries, various sectors. But I just want to say chapeau, because based on everything they have to do, the pace of the business, and yet they're really committed to make a positive change, not only within the organization, but for most of them also in the ecosystem, how they can support also, outside their organization. So
wonderful.
Chapeau.
Yeah, wonderful. Is there more you want to say about this? We haven't really focused on any facts and figures, have we?
Yes. So just for the anecdote, as I said, it's very important to understand the why, and in order to understand the why, you need to understand the current reality, because this current reality is evolving very fast. And I'm sure that if now I'm having another webinar tomorrow or in 1 week time, there are probably new data. So what I'm sharing here with you, with some data, change in demographics, different expectations, how do we articulate the business? This is always moving.
Yeah.
So I just want to go back to the point of, if we believe this is the right thing to do, maybe, and that's really a challenge. I'm really also challenging myself, and maybe I need to challenge more, the organization with whom I'm working. Do we need to spend that much time to again talk about the business case? It's a question that I'm asking myself, and I'm asking organizations. Are we now spending as much time as we used to do in the past on health and safety at work?
Interesting. Yes. Uh-huh.
My background is in the oil industry, so I spent nearly 20 years in the oil industry, where even the health and safety division that didn't exist at the very beginning. So it was, and we spent so much time explaining why it was important to be careful. But do we do
I remember those days too. Yes.
So are we really? Do we need to spend time? There is a current reality. There is a need for diversity and inclusion. I would say Full stop.
Full stop. But there's some figures if you want to. You refer to them, right? So.
And we have hundreds, millions. I really believe that what is key now is inclusion. So to go back historically, when organizations were working a lot on the basics, early on, just having, anti-discrimination frameworks was very important. Before we had European laws. So first, it was really ensuring that there was no, discrimination. So there was a big piece of work on equal opportunity, recognizing that not everyone is, starting from the same level.
Yes.
And then there was a big focus on diversity. Unfortunately, I believe that the focus was more on representation, so on data, more than on making this diversity work. And we realized really that inclusion is key. And I know when I started to create Pluribus, for me it was very clear that the focus was going to be inclusion. Inclusion is what makes diversity work. Inclusion is I used to say it's a choice, it's an option, while diversity is the reality. Inclusion is not a choice or an option anymore, because in your teams, in your organization, you have diversity anyway. Different levels of diversity, different dimensions of diversity, but you have diversity.
Yeah.
So it means that if you don't have inclusion, you could really be in a, let's put it in a diplomatic way, but it could be a big challenge.
Yes.
Because, when you have this diversity around you, but you don't know how to capitalize, maximize, value, hear all these differences, it could be chaotic. It could be frustration. So I think I need to change this slide, because I'm not sure it's a choice anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, it should be a necessity.
A necessity.
In French, we have a word. I need to find the translation. It's incontournable.
Oh, I love it.
Unavoidable. You cannot avoid.
Like an imperative.
Imperative.
You like that? We'll have to think on that. Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. But if people relate, if the senior managers relate to this imperative or this argument as if they're choosing, it's going to work better. So there's an element of real ownership here that I think probably that's the choice is referring to.
Absolutely. Inclusion is key.
Yeah.
So it means that it's really your behaviors and your action that makes a difference.
Yes.
And then ultimately, of course, the best is to work on the two sides, but not diversity to the detriment of inclusion in the past. You need to have really the two hand in hand.
Yeah.
So if you look at the next slides, it's just show one study that was done in 2017 to understand. In fact, today, when you look at some of the organizations, and I think it's a European study. When you look at 100 organizations, for example, you would say that still 42% of the organization are driving the diversity strategy from a compliance standpoint.
Right.
While 31% are more programmatic D&I, so it means that it's really a number of training programs. 15%, there is disconnection with the impact and the commitment of leadership. 12%, so maybe 2 years later, maybe there are more than 12%. 12% are really working on the inclusive culture.
Right.
I'd be very curious because I suspect that 2 years down the line after the study, I'm pretty sure that this percentage has increased.
Will have shifted. Yes. Let's hope so.
Oh,
yeah, let's hope so. Do you want to say more about this journey?
Yes. So inclusion is a journey. It's not my phrase, saying inclusion starts with I. I think it's one of the companies who find this beautiful sentence, because it's true. It starts with I.
It's true.
So in fact, this model, with this plane, that you could say, you have 6 behaviors that we put together based on so many studies. I mean, I don't know, and I'm sure the people who are listening to us, I'm sure you have typed on Google, on any software, you type inclusion or you type diversity, and you have thousands.
A bunch of models, yes, absolutely.
So our role as well as consultants is, to go and dig, yes, and see what is really relevant, what makes sense. So what we did, we had a lot of conversations with different managers, different organizations. What does it mean to be an inclusive manager? What does it mean really for you? And also we had in the past I worked a lot with Catalyst organization, which is a US-based organization but with a global reach. Has done so many research on, again, what does it mean to be inclusive? And then the MIT studies as well. So we really pulled a number of things together and we tried to capture what it means to be inclusive. So this is what we captured. And of course, for each of these key elements, you have a number of attitudes that promote. So when I say I listen to understand, what does it mean? I seek multiple point of view. And then what would be the impact? I give and receive feedback. Then I'm able to identify some of my blind spots or maybe give a gift to someone. So and enhance my inclusion in my team. So I have clarity also in my behaviors as what is expected from me and from others. And I always cultivate self-awareness. So these 6 key behaviors are really 6 behaviors impacting the feeling of inclusion.
Yes.
And what we do until recently, we were doing self-assessment. So we were using self-assessment as a way for people, especially before a learning intervention, they would reflect, and they will assess themselves on these 6 key dimensions. Try to think about, some examples about, how does it translate into my daily work. And so up to now, recently, the self-assessment was a way to reflect before going into a workshop. And then during a workshop, they would, of course, share some of their key strengths and of their challenges, and they would build an action plan around it. So that was the beginning of, starting to define what it means to be inclusive. Because, as I said, and I will say it again, especially for the people who are listening to us, the first question people ask you when you start this kind of work is, what do you mean by being an inclusive employee, or being an inclusive manager, or being an inclusive leader? What do you mean by that?
What do I have to do?
Yeah. And the response is, to be an inclusive person, I need to practice my inclusive behaviors. And then people will say, okay, so what do you mean by inclusive behaviors? Well, this is a list. And again, the list is not exhaustive. What we do, and the work we're going to share again, is one, I would say, it's distillation. Is it a right word? It's like picking some meaningful attitudes. There are probably hundreds more.
I'm sure.
But just what are the key ones that will make a change, will make an impact? So when you are clear about then what it means to be inclusive, because you have this list of behaviors, then you can put an action plan together, personal one at least, because then you can see where are your area of improvement.
Yes. Yes, what I like about this approach and these dimensions, if you like, if you want to see them that way, is, I mean, I look at models all the time. Literally, I'm looking at company-owned models, competencies, values, 360 new 360s every week. And what is clear to me that looking at this is that it's pointing to a sophistication and maturity. Actually, that's what it's sort of asking for, and an intention. So it's not just people skills. It's taking your listening skills to another level inside of an intention to include everyone. So it's got a number of facets to it, which I think is really interesting, and is a way of driving another level of awareness and consciousness. I think that's my perspective on it. And absolutely, I can see that would make it. As soon as you start focusing on the very specific behaviours under each one, I'm absolutely sure that will necessarily then improve awareness of those behaviours in the workplace.
I heard so many people saying that was just a very simple eye opener.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to look at the list and make the connection. And of course, during our workshop, for example, we would specifically on each of these behaviors share some experience, share some conversation, share some tools to build the skills around the specific dimensions.
Yes, really put the spotlight on each of them. I think it's, that's great. Do you want to talk a bit more then as to how you then moved to using 360 and how you saw that work?
Yes. So as I said, it's really until recently that we are using the 360 tool, and the experience that we had with one of our partners who really took the lead and really was a beautiful learning opportunities. Again, always in this co-design, co-learning together. So I'm very grateful for that. The 360 is a way to, again, show a real commitment.
Yeah.
So when a manager, a leader or an employee, it could be everyone, but at the moment we're more focusing on some levels in the organization at first. It's really it's a sign of visible commitment.
Well, it's demonstrating the listening that you were referring to, isn't it? It's an active demonstration of that.
It's an active demonstration. You're absolutely right, and it's a way of, with courage and humility, to accept to get this mirror from other people.
Yeah.
So because it's an easy tool, and I want to again really thank you, Elva, and your team, because the process itself, it's a very easy one. You've got a questionnaire. There is a way of putting the name of the people who are going to rate the specific person. So the questionnaire it's very easy to get access to the tool, but it really helps identifying the blind spot, because as you say, it's all about perception. I feel I'm very inclusive, but I can be totally unconsciously incompetent.
That's right.
I could be totally ignorant to maybe the impact of a specific behavior.
Yeah. Because
my intention is positive, I can have all the best intentions in the world and yet be exclusive.
Absolutely right.
Exactly.
Accidentally.
It's all about perceptions, again, from multiple people.
Yeah.
And then the comparison between your own perception and then the perception from this, people around you, whether there are your managers, your peers, subordinates, outside the office, whatever, gives you very precious information.
Yes.
And this is what we call a gift. It's a gift.
It's a gift. And just to clarify, Isabelle, where you've used 360, you haven't necessarily broken it down into the various categories, have you? You've used this self-perception compared to others as one big category.
Exactly.
And that's worked really, really well for you, hasn't it?
Yes. So it worked very well. So thank you for clarifying that. So up to now, because we are at the beginning of a journey, beginning of using this kind of tool, it's one person who is self-assessing and then others.
Yes. That's right.
Doesn't mean that for future project, different company, again, it's level of readiness, journey, different stage of the journey.
You could go the whole hog, right? Yeah.
Yes. So at the moment, when someone is receiving a report, they just see the comparison between their own perception and then a random, not a random because they know it's the 10 people, but without the distinction of their specific roles.
That's right. And they're getting sufficient sort of fresh view and perspective, that's really allowing them to explore what else they need to do. And that sounds like that really fits the process that you work through. I must show you this photo. This is one of my favorite photos.
Oh, I love it.
Where, you know, you might think, I am so warm and cuddly and inclusive. I'm a nice cuddly little cat. But, you know, there might be a new member of your team who's, you know, who might be significantly younger and more junior than you, who sees you as exactly this, quite a scary lion, and you just had no idea. So that's what this diagnostic process allows you to see with some support and grace, is my reading of it, which all helps. So I think that covers that, doesn't it? Yes.
Yeah, I want to really reiterate the importance of courage and humility.
Yes.
So if one organization is willing, for example, to use the 360 for inclusion for their leaders or managers, you don't use it just like that.
No.
You need to ensure that there is a level of readiness.
Yes.
This is the right timing. This is well understood, as indeed it will require courage and humility, because the report is the tool to have conversations.
Yes.
If you have just the tool to look at it and then put it on the side, it's not going to work. It's not going to be maximized.
Sure.
So having the willingness to have conversation is the I would say the déclencheur, the catalyst,
yes,
for actually using a 360 for inclusion.
Very good. Very good. Well, I'm aware that we have only 4 minutes left. I just want to, I wonder, it might be a good thing to just quickly summarize actually the top question of our poll. I know you've covered this actually already, but let's see if we can sort of bring it together for people. What are, therefore, the critical components of an effective diversity and inclusion strategy? What would you say to that?
Okay, well, I would say very briefly, as we have another 4 minutes, you need to have quantitative and qualitative data.
Right.
Not only quantitative. So you need to start having conversations to understand different perceptions. So it's not only having your people survey, for example, your internal people survey.
Yeah, that's not enough.
As quantitative, because you're going to have data and statistics. Having conversation, a lot of conversation. Having also conversation with your management team.
Yes.
To understand what's the connection between the diversity and inclusion agenda and the overall vision, the overall business strategy.
Right.
If there is no link.
What is that link? Yes.
Yeah, don't waste your time and your energy. Then understand where is the level of awareness.
Yes.
And assess what kind of learning intervention,
yes,
if any, needs to happen.
Yes.
In order to have, some real awareness building, skill buildings. If you really want to then, show strong commitment, definitely use the 360.
Yeah.
And this is just the pillar education. But you need to have a pillar around communication. So you need to ensure that you have a communication strategy. Start with internal communication strategy. Don't start with external, only when everything is started, really start the external, but really ensure that successes, but also lessons learned are communicated internally. And then there is the pillar around the HR management processes.
Yes.
Having a sort of assessment where we are today when we're recruiting, what are assessment processes, who are assessing, etc., our candidate slate, etc. And then the last pillar, which is go back to the 360, ensuring that inclusive behaviors is part of your leadership competencies. So it's really data, quantitative, qualitative, communication, HR management processes, education, and leadership competencies. And this strategy should totally be based on your what we stand for foundations. So your corporate values and your ethics and policies, for example.
Yes.
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell, thank you. That was a really useful summary, actually. And I can just to add to that, I can see that one obvious thing that should also happen is that other HR initiatives like a leadership program 360, etc., you can look to integrate inclusive behaviours within your other interventions and diagnostics that are going on. This is something that we're doing with clients more and more these days. So like you say, the opportunity is to take it throughout.
Yeah, you're right, Elva, for mentioning that. It needs to be embedded in everything, as opposed to be a separate element.
Exactly. It needs to be an imperative everywhere.
Whoa.
There we go. Well, look, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I can't believe it's only been an hour. So I really, really want to thank you, Isabelle. Really interesting, really useful. Love to hear, from your experience, what works and what doesn't work. What we have in terms of moving forward for people who are interested in exploring further. First 5 requests, if you'd like complimentary book, I have written one on 360 and another one on how to deal with 360 if you've had feedback you don't like. Isabelle has written hers on diversity and inclusion, which is a really nice read. I really enjoyed reading it, Isabelle. So first requests by email, please, with your postal address. Then there's a complimentary book, either book, just put your choice. Also, if you'd like an extract of the sample 360 report, we can send you one of those by email, or a consultation on this subject. Let us know. We'll set it up. And I really want to thank you all for being with us. And we haven't got time for any more questions, but any further questions, please do email. That's my contact details. They're the books. There's Isabelle. And any last word from you, Isabelle?
Well, my last words would be really thank you, Elva. I really, really enjoyed, and also I cannot believe it has been 1 hour. I mean, it was really, such a insightful, energizing conversation.
Excellent.
We need to do it again.
I have a feeling we might well do that as well. So thank you so much, everybody, and be in touch very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.